Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, and a happy Monday. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, whether you podcast, whether you catch us in the on-demand section at ProgressiveVoices.com. Thank you for listening. All right, so here's where I start off with a little finger wag at our fellow liberals and progressives who, and by the way, this was led by the Biden-Harris reelection team. So I'm going to finger wag at them, too. Let Kristen Welker give us a little bit of a background on why I'm not exactly happy with our own tribe.
And while addressing the auto industry, the former president made this ominous comment.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
The Trump campaign tried to clarify, saying he was talking about the auto industry.
He was.
But the Biden campaign seized on the comment, saying Mr. Trump is doubling down on his threats of political violence.
Yeah, I don't like us going for that. It's pretty clear. You trust me, the man has a library full of stupid shit that he says that incite violence, violent rhetoric, embarrasses the country, his party, you would think at some point in time. You don't have to take this and try and make hay with it, because it's pretty clear to anyone who listens in full context that he wasn't talking about a bloodbath of political violence. I guess what I'm saying is, if you want people to take seriously when you sound the alarms that he's spewing political violent rhetoric again, at least don't cry wolf when there's no wolf in this case. Am I making sense? You want to be taken seriously? Be serious about it every time he does say something laced with violent rhetoric. And it'll happen. It has happened. It still happens. This just isn't one of those occasions.
At the same time, Donald Trump's delay tactics with the legal system seem to be working for now. The New York hush money case, scheduled to begin next week, now delayed for 30 days, giving the defense more time to review documents. And in Georgia, the election interference case, the lead prosecutor, Nathan Wade, resigned Friday. Wade was scheduled to appear on this broadcast today, but canceled last minute, citing a family emergency.
Okay, thank God. No, I mean, I hope everybody's okay. I hope everyone's healthy, that this is nothing major, serious. Like, I hope it's a bullshit excuse for him not to have done that interview, because it would have been stupid for him to have done this interview. Like, what is to gain from that? My gosh, you could further imperil an already tenuous case that the Fulton County District Attorney's Office is lucky to still have on their plate. No, stay away from the media, dude. Just go tend to your kids, or I guess they're all out of college now, right? But seriously, lay low. Nathan Wade, lay low.
There's one place Trump didn't get a break. His own Vice President, Mike Pence, whose life was threatened on January 6th, who said this Friday.
Donald Trump is pursuing and articulating an agenda that is at odds with the conservative agenda that we governed on during our 4 years. And that's why I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump.
To me, how that's not the biggest political story of the week and weekend is beyond me. If you really want to talk about what mainstream media does and doesn't do very well, man, sometimes they've made more hay about the bloodbath comment than that. Hello, see, that's what I'm talking about. Stop focusing on bullshit and start focusing on real shit. The vice president who served under Donald Trump for 4 years isn't endorsing him. I mean, I get it. He was a target. He could have been killed by his nut job, base of support. The J6ers that Trump is now saying at rallies, I think I might let him out. Yeah, if I'm Mike Pence, I don't think I'd be endorsing that either, man. Seriously, that's the story of the weekend. That is the story of the week. That's what, going into Monday, everyone should be talking about, and not the stupid bloodbath, ginned up crap. Oh, my gosh, y'all. Seriously, focus on the real story here. Senator Bill Cassidy, one of the 7 Senate Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, was on Meet the Press. In fact, immediately after these clips that I aired, here's Kristen Welker introducing him, and he makes the point for me here.
Now, Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, one of only 7 Republicans who voted to convict Donald Trump in his impeachment for attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Senator Cassidy, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. I want to start by getting your reaction to Donald Trump's comments about a bloodbath. Do you think that those comments were appropriate?
Two things about that. The general tone of the speech is why many Americans continue to wonder, should President Trump be president? That kind of rhetoric, it's always on the edge. Maybe doesn't cross, maybe does, depending upon your perspective. I also think, though, that the mainstream media contributes to it. Yep. If you take the one about the bloodbath, which arguably could be about an economic bloodbath, not about kind of street violence related to the election, then it gives his defenders something to focus on as something which was distorted. So, yes, he always walks up to the edge on that rhetoric. And again, that's why people are concerned. But sometimes the mainstream media, whether they want to or not, can't resist, and they go just a little bit too far, which distracts from what could be the impact.
But to hell with the impact, the biggest story should be that Mike Pence is not going to endorse him. And because we're so focused on the stupid bloodbath comment, that is not arguably, is being taken out of context. We're not talking about the bigger story, and that is, I mean, if you want to have a repeat of 2020, you want to get those no label-ish, Lincoln Project-ish Republicans who just are not, like, they're Republicans, but they're not going to vote for that guy. If you want to get them on your side, you gotta not do the dumb shit like focusing on the bloodbath. Focus on the Mike Pence thing, because that's a real Republican telling you why he's not going to endorse Donald Trump and probably not going to vote for him either, if we're being honest, because again, why would a tree vote for chainsaws, right? But instead of realizing she's doing exactly what Bill Cassidy is chastising her for doing, she's got to go back for more. Kristen Welker, let's ask some more about the bloodbath comments.
Just to be very clear, you're saying it walks up to the line. Does that comment, even if in the context, that broader backdrop of talking about the auto industry, does it cross a line for you? You heard what the Biden administration said. They say it's another sign that he's using terms related to political violence.
Well, that's their perspective. They've got a candidate who also doesn't seem fit for office. But you could also look at the definition of bloodbath, and it could be an economic disaster.
Yes.
And so if he's speaking about the auto industry in particular in Ohio, then you can take it a little bit more context. That's why I say you walk up to the line. Depending upon the perspective, somebody is going to interpret it. He's running against Biden, so Biden's going to say it's about political violence. His defenders want to defend him, and so they're going to say it's about economic disaster. There's always just that little bit of tension there, which allows a dispute about the interpretation as opposed to the kind of general sort of, is this the person we want to have in office?
See, exactly. I cannot believe I'm sitting here agreeing with a Republican senator from Louisiana, for God's sakes. You guys have me agreeing with Bill Cassidy. I am mad about that, too. And even let's put aside the fact that, again, have I mentioned Mike Pence, the vice president of the Trump administration, isn't going to endorse him? That should be the biggest story. There also is the story in the clip where Trump talks about putting tariffs on foreign-made vehicles. Y'all, we're sitting here griping about inflation and how expensive things are, and here he is about to raise prices on our goods again. I mean, he did this with China, too, when he was in office, and we're paying more for items that we were, still importing from China. I mean, if we want to focus on things that Trump's saying at his rallies, how about this question that Kristen Welker eventually got around to?
Well, let me ask you about some recent comments he made about January 6th. He said on the first day of a second term, he would, quote, free those who've been charged and convicted with January 6th and committing crimes related to January 6th. Do you think that's appropriate, that people who've been convicted, in many cases have pled guilty, should be pardoned?
I do not think it's appropriate. We're a nation of laws, and those folks were convicted. Many times they pled guilty. If you plead guilty, i.e., obviously you are not a patriot, you're somebody who committed a criminal act. So I think that would be a wrong signal if you're the chief executive and you're responsible for enforcing the laws.
I'm blown away. I'm sitting here listening to a white male senator from a southern state who is kind of making some sense here. Is he up for re-election anytime soon, or is he deciding he's not going to? I mean, this is he's not helping himself. Maybe Bill Cassidy is a Brian Kemp conservative Republican, or is Brian Kemp a Bill Cassidy conservative Republican? Okay, but a dose of cold water here is I'm starting to make goo-goo eyes at Bill Cassidy. Kristen Welker kind of wanted to find out, are you going to endorse him, though? Because Brian Kemp and Kristen Nunu, they were all like, no, we don't like Trump, and now they're endorsing Donald Trump. So she wanted to know, A, is Bill Cassidy going to endorse Donald Trump, or is Bill Cassidy even going to vote for Donald Trump? And Bill Cassidy really tap danced around this.
He's the presumptive nominee. I have to ask, will you endorse Donald Trump, Senator?
I'm smiling because this keeps my streak unbroken on Meet the Press, where I'm asked a question, either this or similar to that. In fact, my staff had an over-under as to how long it would take. At this point, all I will say is that I plan to vote for a Republican for the presidency of the United States.
Well, I have to continue the streak and ask you a couple of follow-ups to try to get an answer out of you, Senator. Just again, will you endorse him?
Well, you have an answer.
Are you ruling it out? I didn't hear you say yes, you're going to endorse him.
Again, no, the answer I'm going to give, and the answer I've given consistently whenever asked on this on Meet the Press, is that I plan to vote for a Republican for the presidency of the United States.
You haven't endorsed him yet. Do you have any plans?
And I've answered this question so many times before, by the way. I've answered this question so many times before. Every show wants it on their show. But anyway, that's my answer.
I hear you. This week's a little different because he did just become the presumptive nominee. So you don't have any plans right now to endorse him. You plan to endorse and vote for, as you say, a Republican. Will you vote for Donald Trump? Or are you going to write in a name?
Really good, Kristen, but I plan to vote for a Republican for the presidency of the United States.
You're not going to tell us. Would you rule out voting for Donald Trump? Let me ask you that.
Great way to ask.
Is it off the table for you?
You know, I think, you're kind of beating a dead horse right now. I've been very explicit in what my answer is, and I've answered this in greater detail in times past. And so I'm just going to stay where I just said. I plan to vote for a Republican for the presidency of the United States.
All right, let me ask you this. You have not closed the door publicly on a third-party run. We've learned that No Labels does, in fact, plan to run a candidate. Have you been approached by No Labels, and is there any chance that you would run on a No Labels ticket?
I'm listening.
You know, I was never seriously considered to be their candidate. It was reported in the press otherwise, but I was never seriously considered. So that kind of, obviously, the answer is not. On the other hand, the very fact that No Labels that was floated, I will say, had a certain rationale to it. People in No Labels actually want answers to serious problems in our country. And right now, neither candidate is actually offering serious solutions. You've heard me speak about Social Security before. Neither candidate is offering something which has a snowball's chance of passing Congress, and yet Social Security will become insolvent in about 8 years. So wait, it's going insolvent in 8 years, and neither candidate is offering a solution which has a snowball's chance in Hades in order to get him passed. So the very fact that I speak about that means that, wait a second, this might be somebody whom we would consider because this person is talking about serious answers to serious problems.
Just to be very clear,
I'll point out, by the way, that if Social Security goes insolvent, there'll be a 24% cut in benefits for everybody receiving it. That's why it's so serious.
We're getting to Social Security right now, but just to be clear, you're not running on a No Labels ticket. I just want to be clear about that.
I'm not.
Okay, fallout from the Nathan and Fani decoupling. Who gets custody of the Trump case? Incidentally, thank you for listening to The Ron Show. Appreciate that. You can follow us on your preferred social media platforms. That would be at Ron Show ATL, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Yes, I'm on Threads. I gotta build that into my routine. I just don't. Anyway, tomorrow, I'm pretty excited about this. I used to, as I'm sure many of you know, work in radio broadcasting, and my very first morning show co-host is a young lady by the name of Mackenzie Clark. She, too, is a residential real estate agent. She is based in Charleston, South Carolina market, and does dabble a little bit in real estate here in Atlanta as well. I know because she and I have collaborated on some things. We're going to talk this afternoon, and that'll air tomorrow, about the National Association of Realtors decision to reach a settlement that could cause some chaos in the residential real estate market. Oh, boy. There's a lot of questions or still, I think still questions. I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. Anybody that tells you that they know what's going to happen, they're just lying to you. They have no idea. Everybody says, oh, the 6% commission's gone. Really? Is it? Anyway, she and I will discuss that. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's a little reunion of my little radio sister, Mackenzie Clark, from our Augusta, Georgia days. That could be a fun conversation. Looking forward to that. So I had softball all day yesterday. Did not get to catch the Georgia gang. So I'm literally just kind of watching it now as I do the show. And Theron Johnson literally said something at Friday's taping of the show that aired yesterday. That airs Sunday mornings, 8:30 to 9 on WAG8 Fox 5, when he said...
But ultimately, also, Judge McAfee is up for re-election. And so I think that this also was a testament to his thoughtful timing of this to make sure that he looked at it from a thorough point. I haven't had a chance to really read his ruling, but ultimately, I think, Lori, the last thing is that I think the defense failed to really express and convince the judge that this was a true conflict of interest.
So true. I mean, I said the very same thing. Scott McAfee, by the way, is running for re-election, and he needed to do something that looked like he was finger-wagging the Fulton District Attorney's Office, Fonnie Willis specifically, really, and Nathan Wade for both just being, what was it, the mendacity, the smell of mendacity, and just utter disregard for, appropriate behavior without actually derailing arguably one of, if not the most important case that he'll ever have to adjudicate, and they are, or she is now, we know, involved in. And then there was Phil Kent from the right.
Judge McAfee had said, this is not about politics, that he was following the letter of the law.
Well, I think a lot of people would disagree with that. I know all of us have been on the phone with attorneys before we taped today. But I think I heard our Fox National commentator, Jonathan Turley, say that, this is like two people robbing a bank and only one is going to go to jail.
Okay, now that's some ironic. That is rich with irony, right? Really? Jonathan Turley and Phil Kent and conservative punditry is upset that somebody's getting away with something? Hello? We were just listening to Kristen Welker on Meet the Press talk about how these delay tactics that Trump is employing everywhere that he is on trial. Everywhere he's on trial. The fact that the former president who's running for re-election, who is the not just presumptive but the de facto nominee of the GOP, is on trial in so many places is sad. Just pathetic. And yet, the delay tactics are actually working, but Jonathan Turley and Phil Kent, they have a sad because two adults who happen to work with each other on some cases here had a little thing. I mean, that's you know what? Let me pivot now to Bill Maher, because Bill Maher, and I have not watched Bill Maher in years. He's kind of gotten to be that cranky old curmudgeon, get off my lawn kind of guy. But even he kind of joked about the fact that people who work together hook up. It happens. What's the big deal?
He's got that trial going on in Georgia, the one where he asked for 11,000 votes. And the prosecutor there, a woman named Fonnie Willis. Yeah, I know. Well, the ruling came down today. She was in this situation where she was dating, whatever, in love. I don't know what it was. With the lead prosecutor who she hired for the job. But they said now she can stay on, but she has to fire the boyfriend, thus ending the people versus some good dick. I never understood what the scandal was in this.
Right.
I think the law has spoken. You're not allowed to steal an election, even if the person who caught you has a boyfriend. I think that's the legal... is that I can't find anything more about it. What, you can't have sex with someone you meet at work? Where most people meet what the f*** is that? No, if you're a moral, decent human being, you can find sex to strangers you meet on the phone. That's how you do it. But here's the thing. The Republicans were claiming that Nathan Wade, he's the prosecutor that she hired, was completely unqualified for the task of prosecuting Donald Trump, their hero, and he was unqualified, so they got him fired. I'm starting to think these people aren't that bright.
Exactly. Of course, now all eyes will be on Scott McAfee again to see if he allows a certificate of appeal or if the Court of Appeals even takes it up once he does. The saga continues in this never-ending soap opera. All right, let's catch our breath. Back in a sec.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So I've spent a good deal of time talking about how the national media, in my opinion, has thoroughly bungled this Donald Trump bloodbath rhetoric. And I get it. The man incited an insurrection. He literally talked thousands of his followers into charging to the U.S. Capitol to do whatever they needed to do to stop Congress from certifying the 2020 election results. I get it. The man encourages gun ownership and stocking up on ammo and other weaponry. He encourages those at his rallies to physically assault anyone who dares to protest inside the venues of his rallies. I get it. He does. He incites violence. The bloodbath thing, however, is to me a false flag. It's just not something that I think the media needs to be paying attention to. In fact, you can just see throughout social media since then how much there's been pushback, and rightly so, I think, criticism of the way the media is handling this. The bigger story to me is, again, that he's talking about tariffs on vehicles. No matter where they came from, they wind up in American-owned dealerships with American employees working in said American-owned dealerships. It has an impact on your bottom line in some way, shape, form, or fashion, right? But I'm also going to talk to you about how I think the media is thoroughly fumbling the ball on the big talk in real estate since last week. Let me give you an example real quick. This is from NBC News.
D.C. area real estate agent Dana Rice could be about to see her entire business change, but she says she welcomes it.
I think is a benefit to both buyers and sellers.
The change is coming because today the National Association of Realtors, the largest trade group in the nation, agreed to pay $418 million to settle class action lawsuits over broker commissions. As part of the settlement, they admit to no wrongdoing.
This is, again, where I mentioned, by the way, that I am a residential real estate agent, a realtor in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. And I can tell you that when I have a listing appointment, when I sign a listing, I don't dictate what the commission is. I tell them there are various levels of services that I can provide and that there are going to be costs incurred with selling the home. Among those costs being the paying of the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent, by the way, is bringing the business to your doorstep. They're pre-qualifying the buyer before they even come see your home. And they're also scheduling the appointment so that the buyer can come see your home without you having to do it or your listing agent, which is why the list agent shares their commission with the buyer's agent. I have a theory, by the way, that most of the folks that took part, the plaintiffs in these class action lawsuits, actually weren't not told by their list agent that some of their commission is going to go to the buyer's agent. I happen to think that some lawyers or a law firm saw an opportunity, some low-hanging fruit, and went for it, and they got a huge settlement out of this, and now they're going to upend the entire American housing industry.
This is hitting the reset button on the housing market, and this is great for Americans, and this is great for homeowners.
That is Michael Ketchmark, lead attorney in the plaintiff's class action lawsuit. A simple look at his LinkedIn profile will tell you that he has absolutely no background whatsoever experience buying or selling real estate as an agent or broker. My point being that he has no clue what this is going to do for home sellers or home buyers. Whatever does come to the housing market, however, he's going to be responsible for it.
The lawsuit argued that the NAR violated antitrust laws in the way commissions for home sales were set and split between the selling and buying agents. The settlement means buyers and sellers could soon be able to negotiate the fees to agents up front. The norm had been 5 to 6% commissions. The NAR says commissions have always been negotiable and that it has always been our goal to preserve consumer choice and protect our members to the greatest extent possible. This settlement achieves both of those goals.
Because the commission structure always has been negotiable. I have listed properties for anywhere from 4 to 6%, depending on the needs of the client, which is exactly what we're supposed to do.
But without the standard 6% commission, competition among agents will likely increase.
I happen to disagree. I think a lot of folks are going to get out of the business or turn it into a side hustle, which I think is bad for the business and for buyers and sellers.
And buyers may choose not to use agents at all. That's a concern for Rice.
My fear is that in looking at the fee structure and what it costs, people will think, well, how hard could this be? I don't need representation. You're walking in, you've never purchased a house before, and the seller has sold 10.
You buy a house without representation, it's like going to the car dealership where they force all that paperwork in front of you and you don't know what the hell you're signing. A house is like 10 times that expense, and you definitely want to have somebody advocating on your behalf, right? A client of mine last summer who is a pretty smart fella. He is a longtime businessman. He and I have been friends for decades. I represented him in the purchase of a home that had been bought and flipped and listed. And we went in, we did the inspection, we found some issues that needed to be dealt with. And then the human eye just tells you, there's some flooring issues here, but that didn't really come up in the inspection. So we had an additional inspection done with the foundation and the crawl space and all. And there was a whole treasure trove of other things that came up. That 3% commission that I was going to get paid, I actually took a commission hit to contribute to getting some of those repairs done, and the sellers contributed as well. And then the sellers tried to balk on paying it by not giving a good credit card number to the company that we had come in to do those repairs. I had to track those sellers down to make sure it was an LLC and there were 3 people involved. Well, I got to the third person who has a huge social media following and started making a little bit of noise. Now, see, this is not the normal realtor stuff, but that's the sort of things that we do. And if you go in to buy a house without advocacy, you can get screwed. Trust me, happens all the time. Unless you work in real estate or home inspection or real estate title or mortgage lending, you need to have someone representing you in this transaction. What worries me is that most first-time home buyers aren't going to be able to afford paying their agent themselves. That's anywhere from 26 to 50% of all home buyers. You eliminate that chunk from the home buying experience, you have a housing crash.
Housing prices were pushed to a record high during the pandemic, but if commissions start to drop from competition, that could drive down the cost of a home.
Sorry, I think that's a false premise. The fact that the seller is going to save some money on commission is not going to lower the price of the home. That's just more money they're going to pocket. The only thing that's going to bring down home prices is that aforementioned crash that I spoke about. That eliminating of 26 to 50% of home buyers. When you don't have the demand, you can't quibble over the price of the supply. You have to drop it in order to sell it if you need to sell your home. Now, conversely, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there aren't people who are making obscene amounts of money in real estate without doing a whole lot of work. There are a lot of folks who make obscene money selling 3, 4, 5 luxury listings of, $1 million plus, who can afford to just do that 5 or 6 transaction load of work in a calendar year and take the rest of the year off because they're pulling in 3%. That's right. They have to share the other 3% with the buyer's agent and rest on their laurels. But listen, I can tell you, I ain't wealthy. I am paycheck to paycheck. I am commission check to commission check right now. It's not easy. In fact, it's been a rather sluggish market since September because of what interest rates are doing to kind of freeze the market as it is. But I will not sit here and tell you that there isn't room for adjustment. I go into my clients' conversations all the time and make it rather well aware that my commission is what I believe I deserve, but that there's wiggle room and adjustment room for meeting the needs of my client, whether it's a listing client, whether it's a buyer client. I offer up concessions for folks that I help buy homes too. The New York Times, the morning email this morning, talked a little bit about this. Free market economic theory suggests that American real estate market should not have been able to exist as it has for decades. See, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the way things are, the way things should have been all along. There, to me, again, has always been room for adjustment. But if you ask me, and I pay my dues to the NAR, one of the problems is that I have to pay huge chunks of dues to the NAR. Sorry, not sorry. They turn around and sell my contact information to lead generation hawkers. And because I'm not an employee of any company, actually, I am an agent with a brokerage, eXp Realty. I love them, by the way. I have to pay for my own health insurance out of pocket. So I get cold calls from health insurance companies and text messages galore. The NAR is not completely innocent in all this. Back to the email from the New York Times. Americans have long paid unusually high commissions to real estate agents. The typical commission in the U.S. has been almost 6%, compared with 4.5% in Germany, 2.5% in Australia, and 1.3% in Britain. Now, what I would love to know is, the agents in these other countries, are they employees of brokerages? Or are they independent agents who have to foot all the fees associated with being in real estate themselves? You know what? I'll spend some time diving into that. Again, I told you I was going to have a former radio co-host of mine who has been in real estate almost from the time we worked in radio back in the 1990s to talk about this. So, I'll come armed with that information when we talk tomorrow. As a recent headline in the Wall Street Journal put it, almost no one pays a 6% real estate commission except Americans. But you know what? Americans are the ones that pay way too much for healthcare, too. We pay way too much for a lot of things because we live in this unfettered capitalistic society. And I'm telling you, if you think home sellers are going to save on commissions and not just reap the benefits themselves, and they're not going to pass that on to the buyer, are you kidding me? It's America. We don't do that. If housing operated as an efficient economic market competition would have solved this problem. Some real estate, in fact, we have 45,000 agents in Metro Atlanta. Trust me, there's competition. That's why I talk about having wiggle room with my commission structure, because I know there's competition. There are other ways to get things done. Okay, so the morning email goes on. Some real estate brokers, recognizing the chance to win business by charging lower commissions, would have done so. That actually exists, y'all. But here's what they do. They don't tell you, we're going to list your home for just 1%. Yeah, and that's literally all they do. They just put it on the MLS. They don't put lock boxes out there. They don't market it. They just put it on the MLS, and you've got to deal with scheduling the appointments and working with the buyer agent and negotiating everything on your own. Sure, those exist, but again, that is the level of service you are paying for. Back to the email. Other brokers would have had to reduce their own commissions or lose customers. Eventually, commissions would have settled in a reasonable place, high enough for agents to make a profit, but in line with the rest of the world. That didn't happen. No, what did happen is we've seen the growth, the inflation of housing prices and home equity and folks cashing in, because obviously that seems to work for homeowners. I say all along, if you want to grow your personal and familial and generational wealth, buy a home, live in it for 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years. You're going to see that you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity if you live in most of the country, and that is money you're making. So obviously, most Americans didn't have a problem with this commission structure in the first place. Back to the email. Instead, an average home sale in the U.S. has cost between $5,000 and $15,000 more than it would have without the inflated commissions. See, that is editorializing. Inflated commissions, are they? I think there's some dialogue to be had there. This money has been akin to a tax collected by real estate agents instead of the government. By the way, when I make a commission, I've got to pay a percentage to my brokerage because they have expenses to incur, and they give me things that I use to market. My website, my email address, the logos, signage, et cetera, and so on. We collaborate with each other using our own little workforce chat groups and this, that, and the other to help boost each other's listings and to host open houses. The situation finally seems to be ending, though. Back to the email. On Friday, the National Association of Realtors, the industry group that has enforced the rules that led to 6% commission, they really didn't, though, agreed to change its behavior as part of an agreement to settle with several lawsuits. The settlement is important in its own right. Americans now spend about $100 billion a year on commissions. That number will probably decline by between $20 and $50 billion. I have no idea how they know that. We don't even know that. The news just dropped Friday. I work in the industry. I guarantee you the person that wrote this email, this column for the New York Times, has never worked in real estate. We have absolutely no idea. In fact, can I just tell you a little secret? In group chats and social media, conversations between real estate agents, we're all having this discussion on how we're not going to mention the cooperative agent. That would be the buyer agent. How much their commission is going to be. We're talking about how creative we're going to be in making sure that it's known in the listing without spelling it out in the listing. That's right. Realtors are talking amongst themselves on how to just keep business as is. Now, this column went into some anecdotal jargon here. Decades ago, the National Association of Realtors set the standard commission at 6% to be split between an agent representing the seller and an agent representing the buyer. If a home seller tried to negotiate, an agent would often issue a veiled threat. You won't find a good seller's agent to work with you, and buyer's agents won't show your house to client. Sorry, but that's just wrong. There's always someone out there who's willing to take your listing for 4%, 5%, 6%, whatever. You can negotiate these things. That's always been a reality. But here we go with an anecdote here. Joan Cleaver, for instance, tried to negotiate with agents when selling her home last year in Mint Hill, North Carolina, a suburb of Charlotte. They laughed at me, she said, and they cite a link where they talked about her situation. We'll continue the conversation, diving into her scenario next. All right, bear with me. We're in the home stretch here. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. We air first 9 to 10 a.m. weekdays on America One Radio, replay 5 to 6 p.m. on demand at progressivevoices.com, and then podcast that bad boy. So we're talking about the real estate commission structure and how that could all be blown up by the end of summer. And by the way, we're already dealing with what is deemed by many to be a housing recession because folks are stuck. They don't want to sell the home that they're in with a 2 to 3% interest rate that they incurred the last couple of years, knowing that they're going to jump into a 6.5%, 7% rate right now. The Fed's not willing to budge on that until consumer price inflation gets below 3%. And so we're already dealing with this stuck situation. We've got limited inventory. So even if buyers who don't own a home, first-time home buyers, did want to buy something, there's just not much to buy because the folks who are in the homes with the low interest rates aren't willing to sell right now. And new home construction really hasn't caught up with the slowdown in 2008, the slowdown in 2020. So we're already dealing with this. And now you're going to have sellers like, well, maybe I'll just wait till the end of July because the media is telling me I'm going to save all this money on commission. Are you? You really don't know that yet. Discuss with a real estate agent what your options are. I happen to be one. If you live in or near Metro Atlanta, I'm happy to help. It's rononthereal.com. Or you can call the show 404-919-2725. That comes right to my cell phone number. Let me get to Joan Cleaver's scenario. New York Times writes, when Joan Cleaver decided to sell her 5-bedroom home in Mint Hill, North Carolina, a suburb of Charlotte, in December, she knew a settlement was probably in the pipeline. Miss Cleaver, a former real estate editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, interviewed several agents to see if she could get them to reduce their fee and succeeded in getting her own agent to drop the fee from 2.5% to 1.5%. But the process ground to a halt when she tried to get the commission paid to the buyer's agent reduced from 2.5% to 2%. She says here, agent after agent told her that if the percentage were reduced, buyer's agents would steer their clients away from her home, saying, they laughed at me. I don't buy that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't agents out there in the world who look at the listing commission on the listing, which, by the way, is going away. It's just going to go away. You're not going to see that anymore. That's the big change. There may not actually be a change in the real estate commission in a lot of transactions. It's just that on the listing, the commission's going to go away. A buyer's agent is going to do exactly what I've been doing from the day I got into this business. They're going to get on the MLS several times a day, check their feeds to see which of my buyer clients has something showing up that meets their criteria for me to send to them. I look at the listing, I check the house out, I see the particulars, make sure it actually matches, and then I send it off via email. And then I'll get somebody say, a client, my client right now, Sade, she'll send me 3 or 4 that she likes. We'll schedule some time to look at the houses, and we'll go look at the houses. And while I'm out there, I'm sitting here holding a piece of paper where I printed out a one sheet of that house. I might look at the commission then, but I'm already out there. I've already showed it to her. What if she wants the house and it only pays me 1.5% or 2%? Guess what? I'm putting in an offer for her to buy the damned house. I am willing to bet you most buyers agents do the exact same thing. I cannot believe, because first of all, we only have so many hours in the day. And believe it or not, we work a lot at this. We're on the road a lot. If I get a text while I'm on the road from a buyer, hey, I want to go see this house, all I have time to do on my phone is to pull up the Showing Time app and schedule the appointment that meets with their time frame. I do not have time to look at what the compensation is. Long before this settlement even hit radars, even before we even knew that these lawsuits were coming, I was seeing listings eventually that showed I was going to make 2%, 2.5%, 1.5%. Now, do I believe that there are some agents who may make that decision? Yeah, no, I'm sure that exists. I don't think it's a large percentage. I would say less than 25%. And listen, that's not a small chunk, but it's not common practice. It's not something we're even taught or discussed in our brokerage meetings. We don't have these conversations. That does not happen at all. Here's the other thing. When I start working with a buyer, I don't make them sign a buyer brokerage agreement. I'm going to have to change that now because the law dictates that. The buyer brokerage agreement is where I spell out what my commission's to be paid. And I, in general, don't even put it on them that if the seller doesn't pay me my 3%, they're going to make up the rest. I don't do that because I know that in a lot of cases, 25 to 50% of first-time home buyers are making up the market. And a lot of first-time home buyers, it's their first-time home purchase. They can't afford an additional 1.5 to 3% on top of the 3 to 3.5% that they have to, unless they're a 1099 employee, in which case it's 20%, to put down into the purchase of the home. They can't afford that. I'm not going to put that on them. They're not the ones making money off of this, at least not right away. That'll be 10, 20 years down the road when they come back to me to sell the house, right? And the thing that really ticks me off is how the NAR just blithely said, here, back up the bus on our agents. I'm sorry, I've been paying dues to you guys for like 5 years, and you just quit like that? You didn't stand firm? You didn't really advocate for us here? And what are we paying you for? What I want to see is the NAR now say, you know what? Our fees to be a realtor are kind of steep. Maybe we should lower them. Yes, you should. You should. You just cost us money as your body. Yeah, you need to reduce your fees now. I better see a reduction in fees to join the National Association of Realtors or stay a member of the National Association of Realtors. I'm part of the Atlanta Realtor Association, by the way, and I better see a reduction in my annual dues. I'm sorry. That's how I feel. Here's another thing nobody talks about. A lot of folks try to sell their houses on their own. We call them FSBOs, for sale by owners, FSBOs. You see them on Zillow, you see them on the various apps all the time, Craigslist, et cetera, and so on. Most FSBOs, by the way, I know you think I'm talking about the clown. Most for sale by owners, by the way, eventually have to go to a real estate agent to get their house on the MLS. You know why? Because real estate agents don't look at Craigslist or Zillow for sale by owners because we have the one stop, the multiple listing service. And by the way, you can go to it as well. You can go through an agent and just pay like a simple $500 transaction fee to go on the MLS, and nobody does anything else for you. You are still for sale by owner. I'm happy to help you do that too, but I'm going to tell you something. You're going to come to me eventually and say, I actually need your help marketing and selling this house, in which case I have to start talking about my commission structure again. I'm not audacious enough to sit here and predict to you what's going to happen, but I can tell you that the media is telling you a lot of stuff that they don't know absolutely jack shit about. They are guesstimating that you're going to see this huge drop in commissions, and I'm telling you, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. If I had to hedge my bets, I'd say, yeah, we could probably see ourselves getting down to a routine of 4 to 5%. Then there are going to be those who are going to try to sell those homes that really need some work done to sell them. And maybe they're going to pay 6, maybe even more percentage-wise. All a conversation we will continue on tomorrow. And I know you're super excited about that, right? But that's the top headlines of the day right now. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show. Again, weekdays, 9 to 10 a.m., replays 5 to 6 p.m. on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, and then wherever you podcast. Like, follow, subscribe, whatever they ask you to do. Just look for The Ron Show on your podcast platform. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Take care.